If you've been in the mold conversation for even a short while now, you probably know that one of the toughest parts of healing from toxic mold illness is not healing your body, but healing your home from mold. There are two main steps to healing your home or environment from mold. That is number one, find the mold, and number two, remediate the mold. Step two, remediation, will always fail, however, if step one is not done correctly. So, to help you avoid all the most common errors in finding mold in your home, I'm bringing on my friend and certified mold inspector, Brian Karr. Brian Karr is a second generation indoor environmental consultant who specializes in working with hypersensitive individuals with complex medical conditions. He helps them to understand if mold, mycotoxins, or other indoor pathogens exist in their homes and if they may be contributing to their health conditions and teaching them how to remedy those issues. Brian is the co founder of the nationally active mold inspection company We Inspect, and he's helped over 5,000 hypersensitive individuals worldwide to create healthier living environments that have allowed their doctors to help them get better. On today's episode, Brian is breaking down the 5 hidden signs of mold growth that you can look for $0 using your own eyeballs. So, if you hire an inspector and they miss one of these 5 signs in your home, or you don't even see them look for these signs at all, then it's time to say bye bye to that inspector. And if you love this episode and want even more tips on how to find mold in your home in the fastest and lowest cost way, plus how to heal your body from mold, then be sure to tune into our next episode releasing this week, episode 223, the 3-step mold treatment plan. I'll be going over even more tips for how to find mold in your home, how to know if you need to hire a mold inspector or mold remediator, and if you do, how to find a qualified one near you. And also, of course, how to heal your body from this process as well. It's time to say yes to being empowered around mold. Please join with me in welcoming Brian Karr to the Better Belly Podcast. Hey, friend, welcome to the Better Belly Podcast. If you're currently trying endless supplements, doctor visits, and diet changes to heal your mystery symptoms, you are in the right place. We're here to solve the real root causes behind your gut, hormones, skin, sleep, and brain concerns. Literally anything and everything in your body. My name is Allison Jordan. I'm a functional medicine practitioner that has supported over 150 clients just like you to heal problems that no one has been able to fix. You don't need a perfect diet or a random supplement you found on Instagram to heal. You need a proven system that heals your whole body from the inside out. That's what I'm here to share with you, episode by episode. It's time to make health easy again. And just as a reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own health practitioner before you make any changes to your health. All right, guys, I am so excited today to introduce to you the one and only Brian Karr. He is the co-founder of a mold company called We Inspect, and he's helping fill in the gap in the mold fighting industry of really good inspection of mold in homes. That is one thing that is just massively, massively missing. And not only is Brian Karr filling that in with his company, We Inspect, but he's also producing amazing, great information on mold through his Instagram and his podcast, which we're going to get to in a bit here. But that's how I found him, and his company is doing amazing stuff. And today we're going to be talking about some common myths on how to find mold in your home. So Brian Karr, thank you so much for coming onto the Better Belly podcast.
Thank you for having me. What an awesome, I should have you just be my hype man or hype lady on on everything.
Okay, Brian, I didn't tell you this before we started because I wanted to catch it in a recording. I'm kind of like in mold finders mode. Literally, my Spotify right now is a mold finders episode. I literally this morning talked with one of your inspectors to schedule. I'm scheduled to get inspected in my home for mold.
Oh, awesome.
Um,
I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
cool.
No, I've been doing this for a while. We unfortunately have mold that I just didn't know how to find. I mean, literally, come on, mold finders. Is it any better of a title? And I knew about mold. I'd already been working with people who had mold illness. I know how to deal with it in the body, but it's like figuring out all the stuff that's home related, you and your company and everything you guys have been producing has helped fill in the gaps, and it's helping me serve my clients better, even one to one. And I am so honored just to have you on the podcast. So let me be your hype girl. I would love it.
Oh my gosh, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. It makes
You're
me feel
welcome.
so good.
Awesome. So let's jump into the topic today. I'll tell our listeners now, we're not going to get everything on mold. Like you have a whole podcast dedicated to mold. Other people have podcasts dedicated to mold. There's honestly so much to say and so much we're constantly learning. So we're gonna focus on a couple things that you guys talk a lot about that I had never even heard of, and I want our listeners to hear. And number one is, what are the 5 signs of hidden mold growth? And I say this again to our listeners who might say, I don't have mold problems. Or we also get listeners who say, well, I know I had mold in a previous home, but it can't be my current one because my current one, blah, 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 but you're having health problems. So, what are 5 things to look for, Brian?
Yeah. So to set it up, it's, most people think you walk in and like, if there's mold on the walls, then there's mold. And that's not really how it works. It actually almost never works like that. And I think that's just like a core problem with our industry in general, is that if I can't see it, it's not a problem. It's like, well, you couldn't see COVID, that was a problem. You can't see all these other things, that was a problem. Like, let's get our heads out of that a little bit.
Mm,
So the idea here then is, what can we look for that the human eye can actually see, that's also not hidden in their different areas, because most mold in our house is hidden, that act as red flags, as cues, as triggers, as warning signs that there is potentially a mold issue somewhere, right? And so I've dubbed this the 5 signs of hidden mold growth, which I now see getting thrown all over the place, which is awesome.
it's
And
so good.
so
Everyone wants to use it.
I know it's so cool. um, so basically, it's originally, before I called it the 5 signs of hidden mold growth, it was called the 5 signs of water damage, and I was like, that isn't as catchy. People don't understand what it means. So then I changed it to the 5 signs of hidden mold growth, and all of a sudden, that you're connecting the dots. It is all water damage is really categorized into 5 different types of water damage. Now, why are we talking about water damage? You can't see most mold. Most mold is behind a wall, above a ceiling, under a cabinet that you can't see. But what the human eye can see is an indicator that there's been some sort of water intrusion or a leak or a drip or something like that, right? And that is how, that's ultimately how we go through a house, right? We use the tools and stuff, but the bulk of our inspection is looking at every square inch of everything for these 5 things. And that's really how it works. So the first one is bubbling, like bubbling paint, right? So it happens more so in paint, probably, and like baseboards, you'll see it too at the bottom of baseboards. So like, go in your bathrooms right now, probably 85 to 90% of you will find a baseboard that has like a little bubbling paint at the bottom of the baseboard, probably near a tub or behind a toilet. Okay. So that is a sign that some moisture got into the baseboard and kind of bubbles the paint out a little bit. Okay. So this is one of the clues. We're like, okay, if this is a clue that says that water might have been here, then we know that there's a probability that there's a mold issue behind here. And then that's how we start targeting where we want to test. So the first one is bubbling paint. Second one is buckling or separating of building materials. Buckling, think a floor that's warped, is kind of like what buckling is. So buckling and warping are kind of like the same thing. So if you have water-heated floor and you kind of feel your foot goes over it or something, that's like a warped floor. Another place that actually happens a lot is in baseboards too. If they get water comes into them, when water gets in, they kind of like bow out a little bit, and then eventually they'll pull off the wall a little. And then that's a sign potentially that there's something. Another one is cracking or peeling. See this a lot in paint, see it a lot in like sink cabinetry, like the wood materials and cabinetry. So like if you're looking across the wall and it's all smooth and everything, and all of a sudden there's paint chipping and peeling for some reason, or there's like a cracking or something going on, there's a reason that that's happening, right? Now, is it 100% always a mold thing? No, but if it's in your house, or I should say water thing, excuse me. But if it's in your house, inside the house, and the sun isn't beating on it, and you kind of get rid of some of these other excuses on why you get cracking and peeling, then your odds go up, right? That it could be a water thing. So that's the third one. Fourth one is rust, corrosion, and something called efflorescence. They're all kind of in the same category. It's basically like mineral deposits, if you want to think of it that way. So moisture at metal, you see rust, right? People have seen that before. Now, does it mean that the nail head that has rust on it is mold? It doesn't mean that the nail is mold, but it means that moisture has been around in this area somewhere. And so we would want to test, like, say, the wall where the nail is nailed into, for example, to see if there's an issue back there. Efflorescence, anyone who has a basement or a crawl space, more people go in their basements, and most people don't just hang out in their crawl spaces. But anyone who has a basement, if you look around at your walls, and if you see like a white powdery substance on your walls, that is a mineral deposit. When water hits stone, brick, concrete, like whatever the material is, you get this white powdery stuff. Does it mean it's happening right now? Not necessarily. Do any of these things that I just said mean that it's happening right now? Not necessarily. But it
Right.
means that it happened at some point. That's why
Right.
it's there.
Yes.
And if it happened before a mold grew 15 years ago and you never handled it, then it is still going to be there today, right? And then the last thing is more obvious. It's staining, right? This is probably the easiest thing everybody looks for, water staining. Oh, there's a water stain here. This is what's going on. But what I would say, most people look for big water stains. Look for little ones, right? The little ones, little tiny drip stains and water stains, that is the stuff that we can see. We just don't normally look for. But if you have a water stain, obviously there's a moisture thing. And if you're seeing it on the front of a wall, what does the back of the wall look like potentially, right? And so that's it. Those are the 5 signs: bubbling, buckling, separating, cracking, peeling, rust, corrosion, efflorescence, mineral deposits, all in one lump, and staining. That's it.
Beautiful. And thank you for sharing all that. I felt like when I saw that on your Instagram once, and by the way, I'm going to try and find a link. If not, I'm definitely linking to your Instagram, because Brian has all these really great visuals where he's showing you when he's going into people's homes or pictures that they've taken of what it looks like in real life,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of blandness, the basic, just like, oh, that's what my bathroom just looks like. And how this could be really impacting things. So I'm going to be linking to your Instagram for sure. I mean, I'm literally scrolling through it right now, being like, which one is it? Um,
Is it the one of the wall baseboard by the tub? I think we had just did that one recently, and it
well,
shows like the spore count that was found on a
and you
baseboard that looked fine.
right, you do
Yeah.
black mold by a bathtub. You do have a couple ones. I don't want to play it and then get sound going in the background. I have to admit that. But I am looking at it, and I'm gonna find it and get it in the show notes for people so they can go and look, especially people who are visual learners. But those are great things. I want to follow up on one thing you even talked about, uh, because that was one of my questions for you. Is you said this you could have had a water leak somewhere 15 years ago, and so it's not new, it's not active, but there's still that mold there. Can mold still be an issue without any moisture or active water leak?
100%. And in some cases, actually be more of an issue because of what happens when the water goes away, right? And this is like this is like probably the biggest myth in the industry, I would say. This really ranks up there. You'll have a local inspector come in, they'll put their moisture meter on everything. Everything's dry. It's not possible for there to be mold because the formula for mold is water plus organic material equals mold. And if you don't have one of those things, then it's not possible. And it's just so funny because there's no logic being applied to it. It's like you're just looking at something written on paper, or you just don't understand it, how it really works. You don't actually think about it. So the flip of this, just before you I answer in this roundabout way, go out in your backyard, turn your sprinklers off for 2 weeks. What happens to your grass?
It's dry and brittle.
It's still there. The first thing is it's still there. It didn't just like pack up its bags like a nomadic tribe and go try to find sprinklers somewhere else.
That is hilarious.
It is still there. And what you said is the next part. It is brittle and it breaks apart super easily. So when I said before this, sometimes it could be more of an issue. When a mold colony is stable, think of a colony like a tree, okay? And so we've all heard of like mold spores, right? It's something like when we hear mold, we hear that. So on this imaginary tree, think the leaves are the spores. Leaves fall off the tree. These are the spores that are created by the tree in this scenario, right? Well, the tree still has branches and a trunk and bark and roots and all this other stuff that is the composition of the tree that all still has the same DNA signature of the tree. It's all still the same tree,
It's all
right?
maple.
But
Yeah.
it's all solid, and a gust of wind isn't going to knock the whole thing into 100 million pieces, right? let's imagine that did happen, because what happens when the water goes away and it gets more brittle and all of this happens is that, and the original story years ago that came up was when I was like courting my wife. Is that thing you still say? When I was trying to get my wife to like me, I would buy her flowers all the time, and she would keep the flowers at the time, and you like hang them upside down in your on the wall, because why? Because they dry out, they get brittle, they break apart, all the things that we're talking about. You do them upside down because all the weight is now at the bottom of the flower. It's not going to shatter in a million pieces, right? That's why you do that. So I go into her room one day. There's like, I don't know, 15 of these flowers, and it just looked like it was just so morbid in there. All these dead flowers like on the wall, basically. I was like, I think we got it. I think we're here. I think I'm good. I'm going to take these flowers down, basically. I go and I just I just go to grab the flowers. I don't even think about it. What
And
happens when I grab?
it
They
just like falls apart in your hand.
shatter in my hands. And she had one of those oscillating fans in her
Oh
room because she lived by the
no.
water. And right when I did it, the fan like kind of turned. All of the pieces blow all over her room, and the carpet and the bedding and all this stuff. And do you know how long it took me to try to get all that stuff out of there, and
Uh,
how much I probably did not get out?
yeah.
Right?
And also nothing says I love you like destroying her dried
I know.
bouquets.
Exactly. Exactly. The point of that entire story is that's what happens to a mold colony. Okay. So the mold colony is the flower. You take the water away, it dries out, becomes really brittle. And then what's the equivalent of the fan? It's just the normal airflow in our house. Every time you open a door, you shut a door, air changes a little bit. If anyone's ever opened like a door or window and heard a door slam shut somewhere else on the other side of your house isn't haunted. It's not a ghost. It's an air pressure change. That happens all day, every day in your house when you do little tiny things in your house. You couple that airflow, that's the fan in this example, and the shattered up roses or the mold colony that's dry, and bam, all of those teeny tiny things flow out into your living space. And that's how you're exposed to stuff that is really old. And that's why it's so important to not be hung up on moisture meter readings and infrared cameras showing there's something right now, right now. And that's why these 5 signs of hidden mold growth, which don't go away unless you paint over them or replace them or something. That's why we look for this stuff. This is the footprints. This is like the dinosaur fossils that are here that we
Yeah.
could then look through and try to dive into more.
That's great. I haven't heard you use that metaphor before. I mean, grass, tree, flower, they all make sense. Those are great. Is that new? Like,
The
just,
flower one's old. Actually, they're all kind of old. I
you
recycle
just,
stuff.
oh, I love
And
it.
one of the things that I'm somewhat known for is that I can just come up with an analogy off the top of my head as well. So that's another one.
Yes. I think that's the sign of a teacher. You should listen to my podcast. I think I try to come up with new ones all the time. Sometimes they fall flat and it's just great. But yeah.
Sometimes you
Um
do, and you're like, I'm just kind of workshopping this. Here's the point. Here's what I'm doing. It
yes,
didn't hit today.
yes, I love
Yeah.
it. We can be friends. So now let's get on to another question I know people ask. Mold's everywhere. You're like, we can't get rid of mold. I even had my father, who is a, conventional doctor.
Mhm.
Sometimes I tell him about the stuff I do, sometimes I choose not to. But
Yeah.
I was introducing the idea of mold and how it can affect children. You've even had a pediatrician come onto your podcast at least
Mhm.
once that I've listened to, him talking about the effect mold can have specifically on children. And my father, who works with children, I sent it to him and shared it, and he goes, look, there's mold everywhere. In fact, there's been mold in this world for centuries. Like and is it really the what's causing all this illness in the world, or is it maybe just something else making people sick? But kind of along those lines, do you have to get rid of all the mold in your home? Say, you know do you have to try and find every single speck if you ever want to be healthy again?
I love this, comes up all the time. And there's almost 2 questions that I'm going to do the do you
There
have to find
was,
it?
there was. You
Yeah.
go ahead and answer both.
Yeah. I'm going to do you have to find it all as the second thing. The first thing is molds everywhere, alarmist, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Mold, yeah, probably around before we were around, right? Cavemen had mold. Everybody, all this stuff, right? You know what we didn't have at all of those times? Houses that were built out of paper that were sealed tight to where there's no airflow going on anywhere, with internal plumbing that then waters the paper. The cavemen didn't have any of this stuff. You know what else they had? They had a wide open front door on their cave. Airflow is about balance and equilibrium. That's what it's about. And what we've done is we've shifted the balance and the equilibrium to the point where these things are thriving at a much higher rate than they ever used to. See, part of this argument isn't that molds existed forever. How much of it was present in our space in relation to how much area we're moving around in our, like, the volume of it when you enclose it in a petri dish, basically, is what we're doing in our house, is excessive, right?
Right.
You then stick us inside of the house, and then you say you are now locked in this box for minimum 8 hours a day, and that's if you get up and leave your
Right.
entire day and never
So
come
that'd be
home again.
sleeping, y'all.
Right. And
Sleeping.
that's it. And then you just leave to go shower and do everything else. More likely 15, 16, 18 hours a day that we're locked in this box, in this petri dish of all this stuff that's going on. And now you start having long-term effects because your body can only keep up so much, right? So then the next piece of this is getting to the next question, right? Which is, how much do you have to remove? Do you have to get all of it, this or that? And the answer is, it varies for every person, right? Some people can walk into a place that's a disaster and they can be fine and when I say fine, in the immediate now, they can be fine. It is still getting to them and it's still probably impacting them, just in a way that's not excessive, and they might not even be noticing it, right? They might be a little more tired, but like, you know what, I just turned 41, maybe I'm a little more tired. They might be this, they might be that, and there's a lot of, that sort of normalization that comes with things like that. But the thing about people, they're incredibly different. Our genetic makeup is different for every single person. Our previous exposures in life are different. And I'm not talking like emotional trauma and all that stuff, is like a whole nother layer, but just, where did you grow up? I grew up on the West Coast, not in a moldy basement. So guess what? I didn't grow up with incredible mass amount exposure to mold, which then reshapes how your body expresses immune responses and things like that in the future, and trains your body when 10 years from now you walk into another moldy place and there's a problem, it completely freaks the F out. My body hasn't been trained like that, right? So I got that
Right.
going for me, right? So you got genetics, you got previous exposures, and you have your current health condition. I don't have Lyme disease. I don't have SIRS. I don't have all of this stuff, right?
Parasites.
So
Really common for our
I
listeners,
probably I probably do have parasites. Let's be honest.
Oh dear.
I think everybody does to some extent.
Maybe
But
but are you at peace with your parasites, or are they kind of freaking
yeah,
out?
yeah. But it's just the idea is that because these three different things, and I'm not a doctor or medical expert, obviously, but like these three things have a massive impact on how you then handle whatever your environment is and how you can process your environment, right? And so we've heard, or I don't know if everybody here has heard, but there's this like idea of like your immune system being equated to like a funnel or a bucket with holes, or like all these different things, like whatever's going on. If you run the funnel concept in your head, because we can visualize that, right? There's two ends of the funnel. The top end is what's coming into your body, what you're being exposed to, not just mold and stuff, all the
Chemical
pesticides and
toxins.
chemicals,
Yep.
all the stuff, right? Full load of all the crap that we're exposed to all the way. Backtrack to what I said ago. You know what the cavemen also didn't have? All of their food contaminated. They didn't have all the
Glyphosate.
come on. Yeah, come on. So come back here. Whatever you're being exposed to comes in the top. Now, the slant of the funnel is different, obviously, for everybody, but the slant is the equation of how fastly you can detox that stuff out. The bottom of the funnel is what comes out of you in the detox. Now, if your funnel is really, really slanted
Really
heavily,
narrowed. Yeah, at the
really
end.
narrow, yeah, thank you, really narrow at the end, then you're not going to be able to detox as quickly because the hole is really tiny at the bottom. What does that mean? It means the more that you pour water in, the faster it's going to fill up the funnel and then overflow. And when you get
And the
overflow, you get
overflow is the
chronic
symptoms.
inflammations and the
Yeah.
symptoms and all the stuff, right? Now, if you're somebody whose funnel hole at the bottom is really big, I could pour all day and it just flies right through the bottom. All the mold, all the toxins, give me all the pizza, give me all the stuff. Cool. I'm flushing it out. It's awesome, right? Now, most people are somewhere in the middle of that. So the goal of how we're trying to figure this out and handle this, and this is why what you're doing is so important and where I come in, we have to address both sides of the funnel. So the medical protocols and the treatments are geared to opening the bottom of the funnel more.
Exactly.
understanding what's in your house and strategically removing like the worst things and the most impactful things, and doing that based on your health position, is reducing what comes in the top. And if we do that, we now find equilibrium with where we live, because we've worked on both sides of the funnel. And now we can feel better. We can be resilient. We can be exposed to things and not completely freak out. And like all that stuff can happen, right? That's a lot.
No, it was a lot. And that gets to the question of, do you have to get rid of all the mold in your house? First off, no. Realistically, we're not going to get rid of all the mold. We want to reduce what I was hearing you say. We want to reduce how much is coming into that funnel for what your body can handle. And ultimately, we want to be able to just maximize how much you can just generally detox, so that you can have I always say more margin, right? You want to have more margin of how many bad things could happen to you. Can you have a bad night of sleep? Can you travel across, time zones? Can you not have, have a couple meals where it's just not a great balance of food for you, but your body's not like completely shutting down. You're not getting this bloating and pain and poor sleep and insomnia and irritability and your periods out of whack. Sorry, Brian.
I know mine
Much
is out
like
of control. It's really rough.
you just haven't seen it ever.
I'm so late.
uh yeah, right. And so it's I always tell my clients, you can't get healthy in the environment you got sick in. And really, we just want to start to reduce the load, reduce the load, reduce the load. And ultimately, it's not good enough to get air filters, because air filters cannot it cannot get all the mold spores. It cannot keep up with all the mold spores. For you, most air filters don't even get down to the microns you need to be at for mold. There's only a
Yep.
couple that are that good. And it's just ultimately you just want to get rid of the mold. You want to get rid of especially the worst types of mold, which we're not going to get into in this particular episode. Not all molds are also made equal. And I think maybe that does apply to this question, is that we're not even trying to get rid of all molds, period. Like sanitize the earth. Molds have a role here on the planet, but it's specific types of molds, which what I've heard, and I think I might even heard on your podcast. So hopefully if you have anything way to edit it, let me know. But like
All right.
Stachybotrys with black mold, our homes, this type of paper container that's really well insulated, it breeds black mold better than previous homes would have been. So, and I'm thinking about homes that were made out of clay, right? Clay doesn't it bakes, and then it doesn't easily just get wet and then like breed stuff, right? Mold spores are basically waiting to grow on these like
Yeah.
dry walls we have. Is that
Yeah.
accurate that you've heard? Was that your podcast?
I
These
don't I don't know if that was mine. I wouldn't even say it's like mold specific. I would just
mm,
say our environments are just more predisposed to have these types of things happen because of how they're built. Now, you're totally right. Certain molds are more opportunistic than others. And when we talk about like, do you have to get everything? Like when I talk to clients, when my consultants talk to clients, we have a framework of helping to prioritize what we're looking at, right? It is important, and I pound this all the time, and I really do believe this. It is important to know where everything is to the best of your ability. It is important to know where, if I think there's 30 things in this house, it is important to test all 30 of those things so I can understand what the landscape looks like, so I can then have the conversation of prioritizing, right? So there are times where people are like, I only want to test, I just threw 30 out there. Let's say we only want to test 15 of these things. I feel like I know this is a problem already. That's cool. I feel like I probably know it's a problem already too. That's not the point. The point is, where does it rank in relation to all of the other problems? Because what's going to happen is when we get back on the call, when the lab results come back, you're going to say, Brian, what should I be doing first? And I'm going to say, well, I don't even have half the picture. So some of the things that we chose not to test might actually be the worst of the worst, and we just don't know that, right? So think of it on a health side of things. Let's say we're dealing with cancer and we're trying to figure out our cancer situation, right? The first thing you do is go through a battery of testing to understand what you're up against. And
has it
then when
messed?
you
Yeah,
understand,
yeah.
yeah,
Has it
has it
spread to the rest of the body?
spread? Is it in one place in a tumor? Like, what is it, right? You go through whatever the series of tests are to get that information, because the solutions on the back end are massive surgery down to, there's the chemo piece, and then there's even more holistic pieces that are below that don't require you to do that. On the house side, am I gutting my whole house? Am I focusing on a couple places?
Are you redoing the
Or am I just
foundation?
moving? Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? because there's a huge financial component that ties into that. On the body side, there's a huge body component, obviously, what you're going to go through, right? So, but there's a repercussion on based on the amount of information you have that helps shape the next step, right? And if we don't get the information we need to shape the next step, all that we can do is go off the information we have in front of us. Well, based off these 15, here's how I would prioritize for you. I don't know if this thing over here is worse than all of these 15. I have no idea, but off the 15 I have, this is how I would do it, right? So the testing piece is so important. It's so important in health. It's so important in the house stuff. And I think a lot of times with people, the health makes more sense because we're more used to it, where we understand there's blood panels, there's urine panels, there's MRIs, there's this, there's that. We understand that there's a variety of different test types that are all created for a different purpose. And they all play a role in creating like a unified sampling plan, testing plan of the body to create a strategy of how to move forward. The
Right.
same exact thing happens in a house. An air test is not the same as a dust test. You sample your HVAC system differently than you sample something else. And you need to build the same unified testing plan to get the same vision of the whole space to then make the best educated strategic decisions on how to move forward.
And the cool thing about this, ladies and gents, listening to this is that Brian's company, We Inspect, they function in a way that they've partnered with inspectors, and I don't know if you train them or what, but like they know how to inspect, and they are all across the US. Are they anywhere else? Canada? Like
It's
anything
so
else?
it's not partnered, like they all work for me.
They work for you. Yeah.
They're trained by me. They work for me. There's always a question that comes up where it's like,
Mm,
well, who are you using in this state to come through my house? I want, like, they all work for us. That's who it is. We go everywhere, all over the country. We've done Canada, we've done the Bahamas, we've done like other places.
wow. Yeah, yeah.
And we're rolling out like a new mobile app that we're in beta testing on right now, which someone at home would be able to take a few pictures, and then it comes back to my consultant team and we can even consult in that way, which is a more cost effective way for some people if they can't deal with the whole travel component and all that stuff that goes on. So it's always been like my goal and my mission, and I talk about this inside the company a lot. 2 years ago I rolled out this concept called the pack, and I was like, everything that we do needs to fit into this pack. And pack is PAK. Pack is price, A or P is price, A is access, K is knowledge. These are the three things that people need. And these are the three things that we need to be able to provide at all levels to have the impact that we actually want to have on the world. There's price constraints. We get that. We need to come up with options that are not just fly me out to your place every single time. Not everyone can do that. There's access knowledge or problems. Just because I live in the middle of Idaho doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to access the best knowledge in the world. Like that shouldn't be a thing, right? And then there's the knowledge component, which is like these conversations that we're having and like everything we put out on social and all that stuff. We need to be aware of these things in the first place, so we know that we need to take advantage of whatever the options are. So so yeah, that's like the general idea and concept. But yeah, it's anybody anywhere. That's been the vision and the dream.
And that's what's been so great, because especially people like me, I work with people from all across the US and Canada, and they're like, "Well, who do you know who's good near me?" And there's a resource how to find people who can in a non-toxic way get rid of the mold, but those people aren't really. I even had someone do that and they did not do a great inspection. It's just a different level of knowledge and expertise to work on. So, if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh my gosh, how do I find somebody or work with somebody who can inspect?" Well, you found it. Ding, ding, ding. We inspect. So, Brian, where can our listeners find you if they want to get more of your free education or book a free consultation call, things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, on the education front, I have a podcast you mentioned. It's called Mold Finders Radio. If you like what I sound like now, there's a lot more of me there. So that, but honestly though, like I started that podcast a couple of years ago as a way because we were so busy and didn't have, I mean, it was literally just me and my partner. And like, I mean, we were like it was a couple people. That I didn't have the ability to answer all of my clients' questions over and over and over again with the same thing. So I just literally started from day one. Every question that always came up, here's the answer, here's the answer. And then I would be like, go listen to podcast 37, go listen to this, go listen to this. Here's the answers. Like
Right.
that's how I originally built it. I wasn't even interviewing like health experts at the beginning. It was all just me giving all of my like consulting answers that I give out to people like in a recorded episode. So like the earlier episodes especially have like a lot of that in there. It's grown a little since then where I'm doing more things like this and talking more big picture on stuff, but like a lot of the meat and potatoes of stuff is like in the earlier episodes. So there's that. Obviously, you know, my Instagram channel, but we do free phone calls with everybody. And I think that's like the big thing. So our sites, it's yesweinspect.com. There's a big yellow button that says have a free phone call. And there's like what, 5 questions. You had to like put a couple answers in. So we just have an idea of sort of what your situation is. And it's an entire conversation phone call. I've really wanted to make sure that the calls don't feel pressure salesy.
They're great. I got on a call with one of your representatives. You don't even call them, you have this great name. Empowerment coaches. She was Nina. She was so good. She was so nice and super helpful. No pressure. Helps you guide you through like what you can financially afford and what that looks like and what your guys' options are. I really like Nina was great. I was like, I love this. It's such a positive experience because mold on the whole is not a positive experience. Like I haven't not loved having to stare at my house and be like, oh, I have no idea how sick this is making my daughter, but I know it's a component of it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that, right? Because it's something we really try to instill. We actually renamed our, you know, most companies have a sales department, they have a marketing department, they have like, 2 years ago, it's like our quote sales department is now called empowerment. Our marketing team is now called the knowledge team. Your job is knowledge. Your job is the K impact. That's what our job is on that side of what we're doing. It's not marketing, get someone to do something like it's share the knowledge and people will come. Like that's the idea. And they will soak it in and they will understand like the value of where it came from. And so every team like in our company has been renamed to more reflect like our company values as opposed to here's the sales department, here's the marketing department, here's the whatever department. Yeah.
I love that. And so if you guys haven't already fallen in love with a little bit of what Brian's doing on this planet, you can also check out some of probably what your knowledge department has put together. You have a mold insurance hacks free training that we're going to have linked in our show notes. 10 most common remediation mistakes, mold remediation mistakes, free download in our show notes, and also a clean your stuff guide, which I've looked at some of these resources. They're great. These are not even everything you guys offer. So not to feel overwhelmed, listeners, but to feel empowered with all the things that you could with all the things that you could potentially be doing to learn more about mold so that you can move forward in an educated way. Then check out all those things in the show notes. But Brian, thank you so much for coming on to the Better Belly podcast and sharing some of your knowledge, some of your time, and hopefully encouraging our listeners and helping them feel more empowered.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me a platform to talk to people and share this stuff. I mean, obviously I'm super passionate about it and I feel like it's really important. And so anyone who allows me to come into their world and ramble on for a while, I'm very appreciative. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Hey friend, I hope you loved this episode. If you've been a fan for a while or newly loving this podcast, can you do me a favor? Drop into Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. When you leave a review, you do so much. You help me know you're listening, you can tell me what you're loving so I know what to make more of, and you help others by boosting this podcast so other people like you can find the podcast too. I mean, it's a win-win-win, right? So if you want a way to pay it forward, just go to Apple Podcasts or click the link in my show notes and leave a rating and review. And if you want some more free stuff, just head over to my free Facebook group, betterbellytherapies.com/Facebook, and you can get access to all of my free support for you, including some Facebook group exclusive stuff like my podcast episode vault, where you can search the Better Belly podcast by topic and find exactly what you need to expedite your healing. I cannot wait to see you in there. Catch you guys next week.